but I just want to answer the question, and Melissa, I'll ask Matt the same thing. Um, so, from our personal experience, and Charlotte's sitting nearby, and she's in the film. There's definitely some resentment. There, when OCD first really came into our lives, we like would sit her down in front of the TV. It was like, go watch your shows. And initially she was like, great. And then she was like, wait a minute, I'm being excluded. I don't like this. Why are you spending so much time with my sister? I don't like this. And so, there's not like a gold standard. There's not like one thing I can say that's going to help, but the best, what Zach just said is really helpful. Understand that communication is really important. That if you explain to the other siblings, look, sometimes she's going to need help right now, but if there's a way to carve out time for the other sibling, and like we used to explain to Vanessa, okay, you've had this time. We're going to leave you alone for a little while because we have to go spend time with your sister, and you just kind of have to, deal with it the same way you would if they were jealous of each other for being in a play or something. Um, Michael, Matthew, if you could throw in a comment because I lost your comment from a while ago, I will invite you in. It would be great. Matthew is another sibling, also on the West Coast, and he's going to talk to, and we can kind of get his perspective on dealing with OCD. Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm going to bring you on camera right now. Sorry we're a little late, but here comes Matt. Oh, hey, man.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. Thank you. Sorry about a little bit delayed, but it's good when we have questions.
Oh, no, that's perfect. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
So I really kind of want to get a little bit of your story here too. So like how long has your brother been dealing with OCD, and when did it first affect you and your family?
Yeah, definitely. My story will hopefully also touch on the question that Melissa asked in the comments as well. I grew up my entire childhood with my brother suffering from OCD. He's my younger brother, and he was diagnosed right around, I think we formally realized that he had OCD right around the time that I was 8 or 9. And he was about, I think, 7 at that point. Um, so we found that out really young, and so I'm 21 now. So I've spent my entire life with it. Um, so a lot of my brother's compulsions surrounded. There's a few different phases that he's gone through. OCD, as anyone who's lived with it knows, goes through phases. It goes through different stages where certain compulsions will manifest themselves more, and others less, or not at all, and then others will come out, or new ones will develop. So he's gone through a number of different phases throughout my life. So I've gotten to see sort of a whole gamut of things. Um, yeah. I guess a lot of my experience is sort of growing up in a household where my brother struggled a lot. My brother is far and away my best friend, um, and I absolutely love him. Uh, and I think OCD created a huge strain on not only our family's dynamic, but also on my relationship with him. Um, that that's a very difficult. It's a very difficult thing to bridge.
And what type of things, just kind of picking off on this question, like what type of things, there was clearly tension that it caused. What type of things do you remember dealing with at first and maybe dealt with like over the last 10 years?
Yeah, yeah. So actually, the first time that we really saw a manifestation of OCD was right around. Um, so we were actually in an airport. We were traveling to Seattle, I think, or something like that, and we were going through the airport. We were going through security, and every couple of feet, my brother would bend down, tap his shoes 3 times, and then to make sure that they were still on, and then would keep walking. And he wouldn't explain why he was doing it. He just said that he had to do it. And we didn't really fully understand at the time what exactly was going on, but we started to realize that a few of his symptoms looked like OCD. So, for example, one of his biggest and the most longest and the longest running obsessions was germophobia. So, for example, I remember we would be in public, we would be out shopping, we would be out doing anything. Honestly, we would be at home, we would be at restaurants, and he would suddenly get a, a feeling. He would get a feeling about a spoon that he was using at a restaurant. He would get a feeling about a door handle. He would get a feeling about uh, a car seat. He would get a feeling that something there was dirty, and he would avoid it at all costs. And if it if it touched him, for example, we were at a restaurant one time, and he touched a spoon that he believed that a fly had landed on,
Hmm.
and he ended up so he started screaming at the top of his lungs, blood curdling screams, and crying. Um, and this is a pretty normal reaction. We were very used to it at this point. And he wouldn't calm down for about, on average, about an hour. Um, so he would so in this particular instance, and a few other instances, actually, the he would scream so loud that the police would show up, or the police would ask him, is everything okay? You know, what's going on? What's going on with you know, with this kid? You know, and sometimes you know, when my parents weren't there, people would come up to me when he would have these, and they would ask me to handle it and to take care of it. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, at this point, I'm only 8 or 9 years old.
So this type of freak out could happen like was it like at school, or you're talking about like while you were
Yeah.
playing on a baseball field, or after like at a play date or something like that?
Hmm. Yeah.
So and then would your like parents so they were, it was very disruptive in your life. Were you you know, like were you embarrassed? How did you handle it? You know, were you able to calm him down at that point? Did you have coping mechanisms to help him?
Yeah. So also answering Raquel's question at the same time. So you know, it would interfere a lot of what it would interfere with a lot of what I wanted to do. So you know, if I wanted to go out shopping for a video game that I'd saved up for a month, you know, a couple months, um, one uh, so one panic attack would take us home, and we couldn't go out anymore. Um, you know, and yeah, so it would interfere with a lot of what I wanted to do, and I think that um, what I wish that I had realized was that, so especially when people would come to me with asking me to help out on the playground, or in school, I would get taken out of class to come help. Um,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So I think that what I wish that I would have realized is that I had the ability and the power to say no at some times. So it's a little bit cliched, but one of the most important things that you can do for yourself is care for yourself, and care for your time, um, and care for your emotional well-being. So there are going to be times when you have the world, you know, you have the world behind your back, and you can help however you can. You know, there are times
Yeah.
you can give all the love you can give and all the support that you can give, and you can be the most encouraging person in the world. And there are a lot of times that you run out of that energy, um, and
You
you
didn't always have to be, you know, put into a position where you were the one that was going to help your brother, or in school, you know, you, that was a big responsibility for someone who's 10, 11, 12 to have to deal with.
yeah, yeah, and it's a big thing when you're that young to try to play mediator, between between fights that would break out. So people wouldn't understand what exactly he was doing, and some people would lose their tempers. My
Yeah.
parents would lose their temper. I would lose my temper, but at those times, I think that I really wish that um, I had understood a little bit more what he was dealing with. Um, I really wish that, uh, and I really wish that I'd realized that certain situations are too big for just me alone, and certain situations are not my responsibility to completely manage or handle, because no one can do it alone. No one can do this alone.
That's true.
Uh,
So that kind of like leads into a question I have for you, which is, you're clearly indicating that there was a time you really didn't know kind of what OCD was. You're at some points you're more successful dealing with your brother and not. How did you learn about OCD? Did your parents sit you down? Did you read a book? Like, how did your OCD education begin?
yeah, so my OCD education started with so after my mom tried to take him to a therapist to sort of figure out what exactly is going on with my kid. So my brother eventually found a therapist um, who specialized in OCD treatment. Uh, so it was far away, like in Zach's case. I don't think as far, but um, you know, uh, we eventually found a therapist for him, and uh, so he would go into therapy, and eventually he would come out, and my parents would explain somewhat a little bit of what they worked on that day, and they would sort of explain bits and pieces about what exactly OCD was. And I think one of the most helpful things was that the therapist actually took a session to sit me down and explain what exactly was going on with my brother, in a way that I could understand. Um,
That's
yeah,
cool.
and
Did you ask for that, or did the therapist like, or did your parent like, who suggested that? Because that's very similar to what we did. My youngest was like, I want to learn too, so we actually had her do a session by herself with Vanessa's therapist. So how did that suggestion come about, and what did you learn from it?
um, I think that suggestion. I'm trying to remember. I think that suggestion came about because of something that my something that
Right.
oh, is it a cat? Oh, hey, buddy. Um, I think that suggestion came about because of something that my brother's therapist recommended.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, so obviously with my consent, because you have to be very very ready and willing to hear it. Um, I think too. Yeah, I think if I hadn't agreed to it, I would have missed out on a huge opportunity. Um, so I really think that uh, sort of one of the helpful things was that uh, the therapist, she suggested it and then gave me a little bit of time to see if that would be something that I would want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, make it something that is in my control and within my power to in sort of a world that got a little bit turned on its head and a little bit out of control. Um, a little bit is what you can do to empower yourself.
Yeah, and what were some ways, kind of going into your brother's in therapy, you're kind of learning about it, your parents are learning about it. What were some of the kind of things um, that like, did you help with his exposure therapy? Did you have to change some things that you did in your life?
Yeah, so uh, so I was never directly a trigger, which was fortunate. Some things that I would do would be triggers, uh, you know, but I didn't really have to change too much in that way. I had to sort of adapt a lot of my schedule,
Oh,
and adapt. Yeah, so to go out to treatment, to come back, um, would require some significant adjustments to my life. But um, I think that also, um, one of the ways that I really felt uh, empowered was by choosing which exposures to help out with, and choosing which ones to let my brother do. You know,
mm-hmm.
um,
What
when
were some of the things that you did together?
yeah, we one of my favorites was we collected a bunch of ants in the yard. He had a huge fear of insects, um, and so we went around collecting ants in the yard, and then we had to let them crawl on us. Um,
Ah,
we had to put them like on our leg or something, and you just had to let them crawl. Um, and yeah, I think that was one of my favorites.
well, as a
You know,
kid, like suddenly you're told, "Wow, you have permission to play with bugs. Go ahead."
yeah, you have permission to go out in the dirt and play with bugs, and it's great. um,
Yeah.
I also, you know, my parents, also with the advice of the therapist, obviously, um, would they let me sit in once or twice on what to plan, how to plan
Ah,
exposure, um, and so I forget exactly what we planned, but I think it was something to do with food, um, which is always a good one because, I mean, who doesn't love food? But um, so I forget exactly what we did, but um, I want to say it was fear of contamination of the food, um, and then when we would have to eat the food afterwards.
ah.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of a little bit of freedom there and a little bit of fun that gets thrown into it.
If you're just tuning in, this is Unstuck Kids Speak Out. We're talking to Matthew here, but a little while ago we talked to Zach and kind of getting a sibling's perspective on obsessive compulsive disorder. So feel free to share this out, ask any questions you want in a comment. Hit the little like button if you like a comment that Zach is talking about. We appreciate it. And so I actually had an idea. I mean, do you think doing exposures with your brother, do you think that gave him, you know, uh, made him more confident or showed him a little more camaraderie, or the fact that like you could do something, he could do it too, or like the ants weren't hurting you, they wouldn't hurt him? Do you think there was like not just bonding, but like that helped him with treatment?
Yeah, it's because I think one of the things that sufferers of OCD really hopefully will understand over time is that they are not crazy, right? They they None of this is their fault. This is not their fault, and their treatment also isn't. It's not crazy, you know. And to see other people doing it with them, especially people that they love, uh, I think that really helps to reinforce that. It really helps reinforce that this isn't weird. This isn't goofy. This is just this is a treatment. This is treatment like anybody else's. So I think it really hopefully helps to empower uh, both the sufferer of OCD, but also I think the people helping, because you feel like there's an action that you can take. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, like your help, you actually can, you're not helpless, and that you can do something more than just set off the anxiety. You can actually help with therapy, especially when you see it working.
Hmm. Yeah,
um
you can be more than just a perceived problem. You can be an active part of the solution as well.
you're kind of echoing something that we have found in our personal belief, that like when you can as a family fight it together, it makes it a lot easier to beat it or get over it, and you're able to establish a different bond with someone. Now, your brother's been dealing with this for a while, and you as a sibling has been dealing with this for a while. Over the last few years, is he more aware of what's going on, and therefore you can be like, dude, you know, this is clearly an OCD thing. Let's do some exposure. Like, how is the relationship since you've been doing it for a while? How has it evolved?
Yeah, so since it's evolved, it's been a roller coaster since then. So OCD will for a couple of years he seemed to be totally fine. He seemed to be totally in remission. Um, you know, Obviously not cured, but he was very on top of it. And then it came back with a vengeance when he hit puberty. Uh,
Yeah.
so the exposures change, and also the willingness to do it and the independence also change. Um, so I think that more recently, really, I've been away at college, but more recently, I think that he's found a lot more independence in doing his exposures. And what I've needed to learn is that uh, he can learn on his own, and he can make his own way. It's even while I'm away, he's not alone. Um, but and he always has my support, but also he's he's strong enough to do this on his own too.
That's great. And yeah, it's a good maturation thing to understand and learn that he can take more ownership of it. So this is actually a great question that we had from Thomas, which is, you know, you touched on it briefly. How did the OCD affect you socially? So let's fast forward a little bit. You talked about how in school initially it was really hard. School people would pull you out and say, help your brother. And sometimes you couldn't, sometimes you couldn't. So like years later, how did that affect you socially? Maybe going out, dating, things like that. And then the second part is actually something I also wanted to ask was like, how do you talk about it with your friends? How do you say like, oh, my brother's got this and this is what it is? So, um, so how did it affect you socially? And then how do you kind of deal with it with like friends and friends that you had and things like that?
Yeah, I think that that's one of the biggest components, right? That's one of the biggest components that I've had to deal with, and that's one of the ways that it's been the hardest, right? So I touched a little bit on that when we would go out to restaurants, or we would go shopping, or wherever we would go. Oftentimes, it was something that I wanted to do. We would have to go home. We would have to turn around immediately and go home. Um, and that really stings to have that type of influence. Take some.
Right. You're disappointed.
Yeah, you're disappointed, and you feel out of control. I remember specifically with my brother. So treatment was about an hour drive on a good day, and so my mom would take me out of school because we would have to drive an hour there, and wait for an hour. I would wait for an hour in the lobby, and then we would drive an hour home. And by that time, it was 5 in the afternoon or something like that. So well beyond any time that I could do much with my day. But I remember just being incredibly embarrassed for being taken out of school, because people would ask, Matt, why are you being taken out of school once a week? Like you got to be doing a lot of fun stuff. I remember, a lot of times my friends would tease me about how easy I had it, because
Yeah.
I must be going to I must be going to Disneyland or whatever,
Hmm.
a week. And they said I was just going out to have fun, but you know, um, in reality, um, it couldn't be farther from the truth.
At some point, did you ever sit those friends down and say, guys, I'm actually I'm sitting. This is what my day is. I get pulled out. I'm sitting in a car for 2 hours, and I'm waiting in a lobby for 2 hours because my brother has OCD. Do you ever get a chance to talk to your friends about that? Teach others about it?
Yeah, one of the hardest things for me was explaining it to others, because I didn't want my brother to be embarrassed, but also I didn't want to be embarrassed. As shameful as that sounds,
Yeah.
um, I uh, I was very private with it. Um, very few people ever knew that that was going on. I kept it very, very close to my chest. Occasionally when friends were over at my house and something would happen and he would start screaming, or he and my mom would get into a fight, yelling match, there's something that you have to do because you have a friend over, so I just remember I'd take them upstairs, um, to go do something else. We'd go play a video game somewhere else, and um, at that point, I had to explain it, and I don't know how good of a job that I did, um, but uh, yeah, sort of one of the hardest things was trying to pretend that everything's normal while there's a screaming match going on downstairs, you
Yeah.
um, and that's I don't know exactly how I would have shared all of that with friends, um, or how I would have sort of regained sort of a semblance of normalcy. That's something that I still have sort of struggled with figuring out. What would I have done? Um, I think that.
I'm. I mean, I was just thinking that you touched on something that I found in my life but with both my daughters, and that it's your brother's issue, and so you kind of need permission to be able to share it and make sure they're okay sharing it. Otherwise, it might cause other issues, and especially if he didn't want people knowing, he has to be comfortable with it first, and then you know he has to be comfortable telling others about it, and that you are too, so that kind of gives him a little bit more, allows him to fight it easier and better. But yeah, you have to kind of give that person the ownership of the issue to allow you to share it. It's not your news, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's for a lot of the time, my brother didn't want people knowing, or my brother didn't want to tell people, and that's that's a hurdle that I had to move around. Obviously, if somebody ends up at my house while there's a panic attack going on, then at that point I need to share because they're involved now too. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, at that point they're involved and they're in this too. So um, it's good to have it's good for siblings, I think, to have some sort of strategy to be able to tell people what's going on and to communicate that the sibling doesn't have any more control over the situation than the friend does or the observer does. Um, I
Were
remember.
there were there any books or things that you remember that helped you kind of understand and get ownership of it and allowed you to understand OCD a little more?
Yeah, so I there were a few books that really helped, that really helped me. I'm blanking on the name, but I know that they're on my bookshelf at home still. So they sort of touch on. There's not a whole lot of literature out there for siblings, um,
Yeah.
but there is a lot of literature, or some literature out there, for how to explain what exactly OCD is, um, and uh, how how exactly you communicate that to somebody who really doesn't understand. Um, but most importantly, even if it's not the right way to tell somebody, there is no right way. The most important thing is that you have confidence in sharing that.
Yeah.
You know, it's not an embarrassment. It's not anything that's wrong. It is a struggle like anything else.
We kind of look at it as, when somebody asks about it, they want to know about it. And so it's a chance to kind of educate them about what it is and what it isn't. And, doesn't have to take an hour to do, but you can kind of at least allow them aware of what you're going through or what, the person with OCD is going through. So there's a question here that, did you happen to lose friends, or did OCD cause friction between your relationships with other people?
Yeah, I don't think that I ever lost friends because of it. I think that it definitely created a lot of friction between me and certain people in my life. Um, so um, to people who weren't super sensitive about it, um, yeah, I had a few people in my life who weren't very sensitive about it or supportive. Um, some of the people who would make comments that I was going off to Disneyland every week, um, even after I explained it, uh, they weren't necessarily super sympathetic. And, you know, that's, I realized that wasn't necessarily somebody who could uh, help me through this and who necessarily could know everything
Mhm.
about the situation. So I would rely on other friends instead. We never lost our friendship because of it. Um, but uh, what you kind of realize is you realize there are certain people who can handle your worst days, and some people who just can't.
Yeah.
And I think that's true with anything, not
Yeah.
just OCD. Um, it would create. There's a different type of friction that it also created. Not just people who weren't super sympathetic, but um, also people who would ask, well, why don't you just appease? Why don't you just, if he's afraid of germs, why don't you just clean things? Why don't you just not, you know, why don't you just, when you're sitting in the car and you cross your legs so your shoe is facing him, why don't you just not do that anymore? Um, that way he won't scream. That way he won't, kick and cry. Um, and you know, um, to that, you need to respond. Those people do want to help. Those people are your friends. Um, they just don't know how to help. They don't know how to help you exactly. Um, so it's uh, yeah. So it's up to you to have that confidence to explain to them what exactly OCD is, and how much pain it can cause. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
you become the teacher, so to speak. I unfortunately have to wrap this up, but I would love to ask this question. I have one more question for you, but this kind of leads into something that I wanted to know. What advice would you give somebody else, older siblings dealing with a younger sibling with OCD? And then second part of that question is like, how do you stay mentally, like, how are you able to kind of be mentally healthy as well when these things are going on in your life?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things about OCD is it takes over a family, right? It takes over not only the life of the sufferer, but it also takes over the life of everybody surrounding the sufferer. So what I really realized was that while my parents were spending so much time dealing with this, uh, or or controlling their anger, or not getting into it with my brother, um, then what I had to do was I had to find time for myself to do things uh, that I had control over, that I really wanted to do. So, for example, um, I made sure that I found time to be out of the house with friends when I wanted to. If I wanted to go, if I wanted to go to the store to buy that video game that normally we would have to leave the store. Um, so what happened was I would schedule times for it.
Yep.
Um, you say I want my one-on-one time with my mom. I want my one-on-one time with my dad, and that's something that you can't interrupt. That's or something that not you, but something that nobody can interrupt. Um, and I would schedule times to be out of the house with friends. Um, I would uh, I would find ways to say yes, I'm willing to help now, or no, I'm not willing to help now. Um, yes, I have the strength to help right now. No, I don't have the strength. One of the most powerful things that you can learn to do is uh, how to say no when you honestly can't. Because if you don't have the strength to do it at that moment, um, then you can't help, um, or you can't help as much as is needed. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Thomas, I would just add to that. We have found it really helpful to have the other siblings understand OCD as much as possible. So whether it's reading stories, there's a lot of good kids books out there. Reading, parts of chapters that might explain what OCD is, or using YouTube to try to find it, or personal blogs or things like that allow kids to understand it. It helps them feel like they're involved a little bit more. It also helps them kind of feel like they might have some education and empowerment to help out if they need to, or be aware if other things are coming up that you as the parent or even a therapist isn't aware of. So we have personally found that can be helpful and loving. And it's really hard on a parent because you got to give time to both. But um, to us, it helps to get educated about it. So if you can help those two older siblings learn about OCD too, or even go to the therapist like Matthew did, and talk to the therapist and ask questions, then they'll be empowered to help and learn how to help and understand too. Just before I let you go, any advice you have for people listening or might watch this on a replay, of things that you found helpful, or your tip, if you will?
yeah. So I think that my biggest tip is, make sure that you separate the OCD sufferer from their OCD. Their OCD uh, their OCD is the problem, not them. And whatever resentment or whatever anger gets generated, it's not towards your sibling, it's not towards them, it's towards the OCD and the control that the disease has over your family's life. um, and you have to remember that your sibling or your loved one is going through more than you can imagine. And it's incredibly important that you show them all the love that you can give, you know and you show yourself all the love you can give.
Yeah. That's a fantastic way to end it. Thank you so much for spending some time out of your day and helping us out. I really appreciate it. There might be some comments that come in for the rest of the day, so over the next few days, if you want to check back in and leave a comment, that would be awesome. But thank you so much for your help, Matthew.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much, Chris.
Cool. Have a good one. Thanks everyone for joining Unstuck Kids Speak Out, our sibling edition. Thanks to Zach and Matthew for giving incredible advice. I have to say, a lot of this really helps me and helps our family, so I really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining, asking questions. If you are doing this replay, feel free to, we try to answer questions that goes on. So if you're watching this on a replay, your questions will still be answered. Thank you so much. We will see you next month for Unstuck Kids Speak Out. I believe I'm going to have one of the kids from the film on, so that'll be a good take and see what he's up to now. And we will see you next month. Thanks a lot, and some big news coming from Unstuck probably next month as well. So have a great day, and thanks for tuning in.